Ron, I didn't know you were going to do that verse, because that's actually how I started mine, was Romans 10:10. It's a great one, because without Christ, I would not be up here. This would not be my choice. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. So I've been preparing this for the last 6 months or so. In fact, I've written 2 prior drafts, but truth was that both were a reflection really of my codependency and desire for the approval of others. One felt more of like a history that simply reflected my journey but left out the recovery. The other felt more like an effort to share a lesson. I was unhappy with both, and I couldn't put my finger on it really until a few weeks ago when I realized I wasn't writing this for my recovery or even to honor God at the time, but really to try and leave a positive impression. I was leaning into my codependent nature rather than Christ. In 2 Corinthians 12, we hear Paul boasting in his weakness so that the power of Christ may rest upon him. None of us are worthy. Our deeds and accomplishments are considered rubbish save for Christ. This is further emphasized in Romans 7:18, where I know that nothing good lives in me, that is, in my sinful nature, for I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. And the basis of the first step in CR recovery, which is to admit that I am powerless over my addictions and compulsive behaviors, and that my life has become unmanageable. I can never be good enough. I can never be in full control of my behaviors, but in recognition of the cross. So I don't need to seek approval. I've already been approved. I'm a child of God, an ambassador of truth, a fellow citizen with the saints, and that continues to be something I find difficult to accept, as shared in the song The Truth by Megan Wood. How many times can you hear the same lie before you start to believe it? The truth is, I am my Father's child. I make him proud and I make him smile. I was made in the image of a perfect king. He looks at me and wouldn't change a thing. The truth is, I am truly loved. I don't belong to the lies. They belong to you, and that's the truth. So my name is Chad. I'm a grateful believer who has and does struggle with codependency, sexual purity, and anxiety, depression. So I was born here in the Central Valley and spent most of my formative years in the Madera Ranchos. I grew up with a loving stay-at-home mother, a father who coached me in sports, a younger sister and brother, and a myriad of pets. We attended a Lutheran church in Fresno regularly and lived a comfortable middle-class life. I was introduced to porn like many boys in the bedroom of a 5th grade friend, but it did not show up again until high school. I was a good student, a good athlete, a good friend. I had a good childhood, and yet I felt not enough even then. It wasn't until I started Celebrate Recovery in December of 2023 that I realized some of the addictions present in my home, the codependency, the passivity, the fear of conflict. Pastor Robert Lewis defines a real man as one who rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, and expects God's greater reward. My father was present. He coached me in basketball and soccer and baseball, but he never taught me to be a man. Instead, I learned to avoid conflict, make others happy, take on the shame, guilt if someone was unhappy with me, never view my efforts as sufficient or enough to be satisfactory. So my life was just meandering along until the start of 9th grade, and that is when my parents separated and shortly thereafter divorced. My sister and brother left with my mom for Porterville, and in my mind that could have been another state. My father and mother remarried within the next year, and I continued to do what I'd always done within a new middle-class family. And if you continue to do what you've always done, you always get what you've always got. I performed well. I continued to be a good student, a good athlete, a good friend, a good son, and a good worker. And I didn't really understand the concept of James 2:14. What good is it, my brothers, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? I don't do good works to be saved. I do good works because I am saved. I also continued to avoid conflict, avoided responsibility, avoided becoming the definition of a man that I noted previously. Life was not the same, and the normalcy of being financially secure in my new home situation permitted me to move forward without looking back and processing. I processed nothing. I believed I would just be better than my parents, not make the same mistakes, that I would just try harder, be smarter, follow the rule book, and that is what I tried to do. Some of the fallout from my parents' divorce included access and lack of oversight to pornography in the home and a lack of fatherly guidance toward becoming an adult outside of being compliant and good. My father was coping with his new relationship with my stepmother by ensuring that he checked all the boxes so there was no conflict. I was coping with my failure to process my grief, loss, and anxiety through retreating in video games and unlimited cable access. I attended college on the coast after graduation with the intention of becoming an engineer because I was good at math and science. But what I truly craved was relationships, and yet I didn't know much about having them as an adult that moved me toward being assertive or courageous, eternally focused, and taking responsibility for the future tasks that God has mandated within marriage, within fatherhood, within the work world. within the work world, I was provided. I struggled throughout college and into marriage with a misunderstanding of being accepted and accepting the responsibility I was given as a man. I did well in regards to academics, making friends, being a good employee, as I did in childhood and high school, but I continued to be really rudderless in regard to living a purpose-driven life. Well, kind of, and when things got too hard, I changed majors, I switched up friends, I ignored the conflicts, none of which prepared me for marriage or kids or being an eventual manager in the workplace. I had good Christian friends and as a result kept busy, involved myself in Christian activities and groups, and kept away from destructive behaviors, but I still had no clear direction post-graduation. I returned to Fresno in 2003, completed a master's in social work because I liked the idea of helping others, and shortly thereafter married. I was nearly 30 and felt I needed to move into this next stage of life, but I was doing so without a clear understanding of being mature in my faith and in relationships. I defaulted to checkboxes in choosing a spouse, and from that perspective, I was marrying someone that met all of my criteria, and I met hers, but we didn't really know each other. So we both did what we had always done, and that was being busy with Christian activities and serving, and honestly not focusing on communication within the marriage. So I married in 2006 after spending less than 45 days face-to-face prior to our wedding day. Checkboxes galore, lots of talking, no sexual temptation. She was across the globe on a missions trip. Ability to start my career without distraction, options for future missions, but was there actually love and connection or just really a manufactured relationship based on ideals and no reality? We talked about what we thought was necessary, but we never talked about what needed to be talked about. My dad's inability to have difficult conversation, my mother's codependency, my father's tendency to retreat in the face of conflict, my mother's need to please others, my in-laws' alcoholism, gossip nature, fear, anxiety, and mental health, their codependency and need to control. I knew about the number of kids we wanted, the missions we were interested in, going to church, giving back to the community, but I had no clue how to fight fair, fight at all, really. I was a passive husband, and she was an assertive wife, quite similar to my own familial upbringing, which I had already learned was a recipe for disaster in the long run, but it was familiar. But I refused to see this possibility. Denial is a refusal to admit or acknowledge something that's threatening or painful. We maintained this practice through 17 years of marriage, and in 2023 separated, with the divorce finalizing in December of 2024. Marriage was good until it wasn't. Work was good until it wasn't, but I didn't then face those giants. I hid and retreated and refused unconsciously to fight. Why? Was I weak? Was I confused? No, I was simply not equipped. I grew up in a home where everything was perfect until it wasn't, and then that 17 marriage exploded and was no more, and guess what? Here I was, 17 years after I got married, experiencing the same thing with a son and daughter the same ages as my sister and I, and a spouse that wouldn't reconcile because she had believed the lie that I can't or won't change. But had I shown her any differently? Not really. I had chosen to be offended and focus on her shortcomings while ignoring my own. I didn't see it at the time, but a friend pointed out that for the entirety of the marriage, it was not only busy with Christian family activities, but it was also filled with continual crisis after crisis that we worked through. But again, never used to strengthen our own relationship. We lost 4 family members in the first year, decided to be foster parents in the second, had our first child in the third who was premature, took guardianship over 3 children in our fourth, had our second child in our fifth, dealt with sexual abuse in the home in the sixth, the removal of 2 of the children in our seventh, a kidnapping in our eighth, a cancer diagnosis in our 10th, mental physical diagnoses with our children in our 11th and 12th, and then COVID moving into our 13th. We handled each crisis well on the outside, but each occurrence pushed me further and further into my coping mechanisms from childhood. I retreated to my room. I became silent. I spent hours binging on mindless shows and apps. I held on to my anger until I didn't in the last couple of years of the marriage, where I sparred with my wife verbally. I yelled within earshot of the kids. I coped by further sleeping, scrolling, binge watching, whatever, and turning to sexually impure thoughts and actions. I also realized that the various hedges I had in place through the majority of the marriage started falling away. We still attended church and Sunday school, but we no longer were part of a life group, a men's accountability group. Proverbs 13:20 says, "Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm." Nor having a male or couple's mentor, familiar and otherwise. I was doing the best I could with the tools I had developed through the years. Countless Christian books and studies, and yet somehow I was missing one of the most important tools in the box, the Bible, the word that told me to surround myself with accountability partners, to immerse myself in the truths found in the Bible, to pray without ceasing, to give sacrificially and with a glad heart. And yet the more difficult work, marriage, parenting became, the more distant I became from other men, from the word, from prayer, and yet I couldn't understand why I felt lukewarm or why my marriage wasn't improving. Amid the crisis, I was lost. The issue in the marriage was not the works, but the relationship. It was absent. Dysfunction is the gift that keeps on giving. And then many will be offended, or from Matthew 24, 10 through 13. And then many will be offended, will betray one another, and will hate one another. Then many false prophets will rise up and deceive many. And because lawlessness will abound, the love of many will grow cold. But he who endures to the end shall be saved. So I had chosen to be offended, felt betrayed, started to have a hate towards my spouse, which allowed for deception to come in and sin to enter in, and really for my relationship with Christ to grow cold. I was playing the victim at the point of the separation. I felt offended and therefore was not quite ready for recovery. In most ways, I was still doing well from the outside. I held on to my job, had sufficient finances, no abusive substances, no abuse of others, no physical, medical issues, even though my relationships with my spouse, my children, and a number of friends was fractured and fracturing. It took a few months, but I was starting to see that I needed help, and doing what I had been doing was not working, despite attending church and men's groups and Sunday school and continue to put on a facade. I definitely had not been leading my family. I was being led by work, my wife, my stress, the influences I was allowing in my life. I had simply been surviving not for just months, but years. Many seasons, all I could do during the week was make it through the workday and then crash at home. Maybe eat dinner with the family, maybe spend time with the kids before I went to my room and isolated. I was depressed, I was overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to fix it. I went to the therapy because I was told to. I took medication because I was told to. I met with a mentor because I was told to. I did what looked good on paper, but I wasn't invested in my heart. I was offended and had built up invisible walls to protect myself from offense. Even in the past 4 years, I had attended Regen, and another church had a Men in Action to build on leadership, but I wasn't really invested. I thought I was, but those around me could see I did it for the checkbox, not for the growth, to point the finger, not purposefully, not to pull the wool over my spouse, but because I thought it would help. But you always get what you've always got if you always do what you've always done. My spouse refused to hear my testimony, my amends, and told me that she thought Regen had made me a worse person. And I was like, really? I just spent the last year every Monday night going through inventory, amends, the 12 steps, and I was worse? It didn't make sense, except that it did with my belief system, with my social worker background, because opening up wounds and trauma does bring out ugliness, and without a plan or support to process it, it does look and feel like rubbish to those closest to me. Refining hurts. Thankfully, in time, I learned I didn't need to take this road alone, and did find this group, Celebrate Recovery, men to be accountable to, and a sponsor to support my recovery, as well as a therapist to further work on my emotional and mental healing. Furthermore, we can rejoice in the reality that no matter what we're going through, God sees, he hears, he cares, and he acts to guard our faith and bring us to our glorious inheritance in a world where nothing perishes or fades. 1 Peter 1, 4, and 5. What was that lie that I was believing, that I'm not good enough? That was my word I used in 22 through 24, the word enough, and that has carried through my life. All A's and 1B, not good enough. All of your caseload -1, doing well, not good enough. Budget in the black, but behind on some paperwork, not good enough. Finalized an adoption, but short-staffed, not good enough. Tithing and saving up money, but not getting to Minnesota twice a year as was expected, not good enough. Keeping my job, but struggling with anxiety, not good enough. Not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. As a parent, you didn't get the kids to sleep on time. As a friend, they only respond when I reach out. What's wrong with me? As a boss, staff leave and it must be my fault. I can't hear or see the truth amidst all the noise living rent-free in my head. So was the divorce my fault? That is the voice not only in my head, but that I'd heard from my spouse and what she'd shared in regards to her parents and the kids. And. I can't fix it, so where do I go? Who do I seek? The truth is, I am my Father's child, and I'm truly loved by a God who's good when I'm not good enough. I was faithless, selfish, and in the process of separation, seeking out affirmation from others and the world instead of an attitude of peace and grace. I wanted to be the victim. I wanted to blame my spouse. I did not want to listen to Romans 12:18, if possible, so far as it depends on you. Live peaceably with all. I was angry. I was hurt. I wanted to justify my sinful behavior and poor coping behaviors on my spouse. But it was a friend who introduced me to a friend that introduced me to Celebrate Recovery. I didn't want to attend. I wanted to continue with my own pity party. But I was finally ready to humble myself enough to start my recovery journey in earnest, and it took a divorce to do it. And while God hates divorce, this is where God has put me. I've learned at Celebrate Recovery to come as you are, broken and hurting, and that those in Celebrate Recovery will walk alongside me in my road to recovery. I believe that Celebrate Recovery has been a springboard into other healthy ventures, such as completing a step study and being in my second step study now, continuously attending a codependency class, running with a group of Christian friends and using that time to pray and share, joining a life group and a men's Bible study, and at the heart, listening and applying Scripture. I've been able to hear so many stories since my separation, stories that let me know I am not alone and that there is healing, share so many hurts and start to have difficult conversations at work and at home, be involved in lives of hurt and broken people that I would never have crossed paths with, in part due to hitting a place where all my efforts truly weren't enough to fix my situation and I was forced to rely on God. Would I wish divorce upon myself for this experience? No. God hates divorce, but it doesn't mean that this time was wasted. In fact, I've seen growth and healing over the past year. Psalm 32:5 says, I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgressions to the Lord, and you forgave the iniquity of my sin. As a result of what has happened over the past 15 months, I have never been surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses as I have been in the last year. It does not mean it has been easy. Does not mean that God loves divorce, but it does mean that God is present as always and cares about me. He loves me for who I am. My mess and my recovery will be a message for me and hopefully for my children that healing and change are possible. To the newcomer, the program really does work if you work it. I fall in the category of people that like to do it alone and be by myself, and yet I found after 15 months of continuous recovery in community, I'm in a much better place, not just spiritually, but physically, mentally, emotionally, and relationally. Secondly, don't let your pride get in the way of entering into this place and coming back again and again and again. I was recently talking to a coworker at my previous employment. I stepped away 3 weeks ago after 19 years and learned that he had taken a leave of absence. In checking up on him, I learned that it took the doctor putting him on a leave of absence to be humbled. He noted that he wasn't proud of it. He felt weak in taking that time off, but he had to acknowledge that weakness, set aside his pride to receive the help recovery he needed in that situation. My grace is enough for you, for where there is weakness, my power is shown the more completely. 2 Corinthians 12:9. In the same way, the sooner we can set aside our pride and enter recovery with a humble spirit, the less pain we possibly must endure before the Lord humbles us into a place of submission. So with that, I'll keep on coming back because I need to for my recovery. And I was just shared last week by Ron, give it 6 weeks and see what God can do. The rains came down for 40 days. The giant taunted Israel for 40 days. Jesus was tempted for 40 days in the desert. The Israelites wandered for 40 years, but thanks be to God that day 41 is coming. Thank you.